start. Thank you very much. Okay, good morning. Welcome everybody to the Environmental Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the 26th of January at 10:30. I'm Julian Courtier. I'm the chairman of the committee today. Unfortunately, Nikki is ill. Has apologies. Please, we need to remind everybody they need to mute their microphones unless they're speaking and indicate if they wish to speak in the chat box. Remind any members of the public, if there is any, that the chat box is for members only, and if they will be informed that they are not to use it, and if they continue, will be expelled from the meeting. Please remember to keep all your phones and other distractions to a minimum. And with that, we'll move to any comments of the public, which, as far as I'm aware, we've not received any.
No, Chairman, there's no comments from members of the public. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, we'll move to item 2, the register of attendance.
Good morning, Chairman. Can I check the attendance? Councillor Helen Crawford.
Present. Morning.
Good morning. Councillor Gloria Johnson.
Present.
Councillor Linda Wooden.
Present.
Councillor Judy Stevens. She's substituting for the chairman.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Councillor Baxter, I've unmuted you. Can you confirm if you're here, please?
Yes, good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Councillor Phil Dilks.
Good morning, everyone, yes.
And Councillor John Cottier.
Good morning.
Morning. Everybody is present. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just say that as chairman, it's Breeza Griffin. I've come to observe what happens in the meeting.
It's noted. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move across to item 3, which is disclosure of interests. Has anybody, if they indicate any items that they've got, disclose any items of interest in the chat box, if they have any. I'll give a couple of minutes for that to happen. Doesn't look like it is. Right, okay, we'll move across to item 4, which is action notes from the meeting held on the 15th of December. Hang on, I missed one.
No, your item 4 is the action notes from the previous meeting.
Yes, I'm just wondering when the minutes from the meeting is.
For overview and scrutiny, we call them action notes rather than minutes, so it's one and the same.
Okay. Okay. Which are right? Can members indicate if they have any comments on accuracy of the action notes and agreed their accuracy subject to the subject changes? No vote is needed for this. Is there anything that's wrong with them? You'll go through by page. Page 5, page 6, page 7, 8, page 9.
Excuse me, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. On page 9, the second paragraph down, last sentence, there's just a word missing. The sentence starts, members were advised that presently there, approximately, I think the word are should be in there.
Do you know what stopcock is?
Okay. Page 10 and page 11. Okay. Susan, will you make the note of that change, please?
It's been noted, Chairman. Thank you.
We move on to item 5, updates from previous meetings. Pages 13 and 14 of our notes. Minutes. Sorry.
Chairman, may I just ask a question? On page 13, it says actions meeting 8th of December. Should that be the 15th of December?
Yes, it should be.
Thank you, Chairman.
I missed that as well.
That's been noted, Chairman. Thank you for drawing that. Thank you.
Okay, there was one other item in the council meeting. We had a Councillor Baxter mentioned a thing that we'd agreed on. Checking, I actually found that we agreed to consider not to actually do. I'd like that item actually added to our list of things to look at for next. That was the one to do with trees. We would consider that council would plant trees. Right. We shall move to item 6, which is dashboard for performances. I've been told that Dr. Mosley would.
Sorry, Chair. I had myself on mute. Could you please repeat what you said about trees?
An item in council to do with us planting trees. It was actually that we would consider the possibility of planting trees and the costs therein. Not that we agreed to do it.
Okay, so will that come up under our work plan?
Yes, I'm going to add it to our work plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Where was I? Oh yeah. Performance dashboards, pages 15 to 27. Peter, would you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you, John, and welcome, councillors, and thanks for being on the meeting today. The performance dashboard report in front of you is one that is a revision following comments from councillors in the past, and with some more up-to-date data on there as well. The recommendation is to approve the revised dashboards and continue to support the ongoing transformation of performance reporting. The dashboards are contained in the appendices, and I think you'll agree that Ben's done a great job of putting these together. They provide us with a very, very good guide of how things are going. I think there's a cautionary tale to be had in some respects, in that with some things we don't have 100% control over what people do within the district, but of course it's of interest to us, and we do want to encourage people to improve things like their waste recycling. Some of the data that we get is delayed, and that's because we don't collect it, other parties collect it, and of course as soon as that's available, that can be incorporated within that. There is an item under section 3 which refers to the corporate plan performance indicators, and as you know, we've adopted in full council the corporate plan for the council, and there are some issues in there for us to consider, and I know that there's a report coming from the leader later in this meeting with regards to that, but I think it's interesting. We've got the scatter plots within here with regards to our carbon reduction, and that's a really, really good thing to look at in terms of putting into perspective what our emissions are with regards to our emissions later on in the appendix, and the importance of us encouraging our residents and neighbours to do their bit with regards to reducing both their carbon footprints and also their reliance on waste services, for example, because waste is one of the biggest things that we do as a council. It's one of the things that we can encourage people to to think about more as we move forward. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion from the members today and hearing the comments and seeing whether or not we can take this forward and actually be make these performance dashboards better as we move forward. Thank you.
So how do I speak?
We can hear you now, Ashley.
Hello, Peter. I've got down here, says Ben Russell to present. Obviously, you've done that for him, I'll take it.
No, it's well, when it's one of my reports, John, I put the I present it, and the officers sit in the background, and if there's extra detail required, then they're there and available if needed.
Okay, then we'll move across to Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling with my machine because I'm trying to do the Skype and the reports on the same screen. I've picked up the supplementary report rather than the original notes. However, I've got on the sheet on the public reports pack. I've only got a sheet that's called Waste Performance, and then the climate change stuff. Are we sure that we've got everything that we asked for on this report? We had 7 performance indicators that we were asking about, and the waste performance sheet, I think you'd call it a dashboard, would you? The bit that says report ending July 2020. It still doesn't show any comparison year on year. It shows 41.58% recycling. I'm sorry, from the screen that I'm on, I can't understand how that 41% is composed. Which bar chart am I looking at to try and work out where the 41% comes from?
There should be, actually, underneath the 41.58, there should be a waste collection composition tonnes by month chart. If you're looking at something in black and white, you're probably not going to get the...
No, I've got it in colour. So the purple is residual domestic waste.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's right. Then you've got the blue, which is the domestic recyclable waste, and then there's the garden waste. And I think the thing is that's in, that's converted it into tonnes. So yeah, you've got your garden plus your domestic recyclable will be your proportion of recycling, reuse, and composting, and then the purple is your domestic residual. So that would make up the other 59 or 58.42%.
Okay. So, yeah. So it's really helpful to have got this far, because we can now start interrogating the data and ask things like, why is there such a massive difference between the amount of waste collected in, say, February and September or October? We seem to have way more. So February. Yeah. We weren't into COVID in February, so it can't have been a COVID thing. It was just a low month for waste collection, and even putting aside garden waste, which was obviously low in February because gardens are slow, and I think we do one less collection. But if you look at the amount of domestic waste versus the following September, there's quite a big difference there. Is this a seasonal thing? And the 41%, I mean, that's great that we've got back up to 41%. Is that just because of the garden waste that we're now up to 41%, or is there another underlying theme?
Right, I think you raised some good points there, Ashley. to drill down and work out why 1 month might be different to another would be incredibly difficult to do, because obviously there may well be things with personal behaviour, people's behaviour, etc., which we're perhaps not aware of or not party to. I think looking at those as cycles is more helpful. As you say, I mean, it would be interesting, for example, to see whether or not, if you go back to the previous year, in February 2019, there was a similar pattern. In the yes, very, very low green waste bins, but that's to be expected because during the winter there's only a monthly collection and people aren't cutting the grass and all of that kind of stuff. But also it would probably be helpful to go back one further month if you wanted to look at that, just to see whether or not January was higher. Because what I suspect is happening is there's an impact of Christmas and behaviour in that respect. So over Christmas you'll perhaps see things being given at Christmas, but then they'll be disposed of, or the packaging will be disposed of, or there'll be unwanted gifts and all of that kind of stuff, or people have New Year clear outs or whatever in January. And then in February, everybody's getting over the credit card bash that you've had at Christmas, etc., and perhaps they're not buying as much. But it's difficult to, you perhaps can't say for surety that that's what's happening. But you're right. Having a look at this data does allow you to perhaps question, what's going on. But I think it's probably important to recognise that we might never know why that really was. So looking at it as a cycle would be better. In terms of the recycling rate, 41.58, that should that I believe is an average. I'd need Ben to just clarify that that's an average if he's on the call with regards to that. And it's a large proportion of it is green waste. So that's that's a big contributor. The slightly worrying thing perhaps is that if we don't have green waste, then that recycling rate falls like a stone, doesn't it? And then we need to be identifying what contributes or what constitutes the recycling in that respect. Some of this comes down to manufacturer packaging and the like, and there's still a lot of confusion about what you can and can't put in that grey bin. There is work with the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership, which of course is looking at separating this out with things like dry paper card, for example, so that all about that, and the glass and the metals. But we still have an issue with regards to manufacture and thin film plastics, which is something that really the supermarkets and the retailers really need to grab by the hands. Hopefully that is Ben on the call, John. Perhaps
I am here, Councillor. Thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of the kind of two key points there, you said about it being helpful to see January 2019. We do have that data in the more active version of this dashboard, and I've just pulled it up, and we can see a similar December drop, January peak, then another February drop in the same period for 2018, 2019, that turn of year. It mirrors that same up and down wiggle we have. So I don't know the best way to phrase that. But, so it does look to be a seasonal change there. Similarly, you asked the question on whether the recycling, reuse and compost rate was an average. That is the average for the reporting quarter. So that July to September, that the 41% is for the July to September period.
Oh, okay, that's not clear from the report.
Okay, I can make some visual changes.
So what's the year-on-year change?
Sorry, Ashley. That actually says in the top right-hand corner of that page says reporting period. It's very clear.
Yeah, I can see where Ashley's coming from though, John, because it's placed above the chart where you would perhaps drill down into the detail. So I can understand why why it's saying that. I had assumed that it was the average for the chart that was underneath it, not necessarily for the reporting period, because the reporting period is off to one side. So there's perhaps some layout things there to make it clearer.
So yeah, so we're only measuring the months of high garden waste tonnage. I mean, it would be good to see year on year. I'm also interested if Ben has the figures for the year on year increase in domestic residual waste. So the purple bar, that looks as if it's gone up a lot over the 18 months or so that we've got, but we can't compare year on year. I mean, after the meeting, I'd like to compare notes with Ben and his colleagues over the actual figures, because it seems to me that all waste has gone up. I don't know if anybody can confirm that, but it appears, and it's probably a COVID related thing, that people are chucking more out.
There's been an impact of COVID on it. I'm not seeing, I'm not identifying that it's a significant increase on the purple line, by the way, but maybe, my eyesight's not perhaps good, but there are certain months where it does go up considerably. But the thing with COVID is that obviously, people have stopped going out when there's lockdown. There are no eateries and pubs and this, that, and the other going on. So actually, people are cooking at home more. They're using more stuff from the supermarket at home, and consequently, that's finding its way into the residual and recycling bins. On the doorstep collection.
So trade waste commercial waste will have gone down a lot, which is not much of a silver lining, really.
It's gone down a bit actually, but not as much as you'd imagine. Funnily enough, it's an odd thing because there's been a compound in. It's been compounded by the change in the process for using the household waste recycling centres, which has actually knocked out anybody that was perhaps using that facility for getting rid of trade waste, and it's moved it more to through the proper commercial channels. So actually the offset of the reduction in trade waste from things like restaurants and pubs and the like, which is significant, has been offset by an increase from tradesmen.
There is a massive, it looks like a big increase in fly tipping. There's no indication of percentage on it, and certainly anecdotal evidence locally shows that fly tipping is up. What can we do about it? I mean, I blame the county council for not managing their waste sites properly, but as a district council, what can we do about this? What are we doing about fly tipping?
Well, there's a limit to what we can do. Excuse me a minute. There's hang on a minute. Can you just pause me a minute, please?
No worries.
Councillor Cottier, did you want me to jump in whilst Peter's responding to whatever's happening?
If you want to, yes, please.
Councillor Baxter, as Councillor Mosley was just starting to say, what we can do is rather limited. It has increased by a significant percentage in terms of fly tipping. The team are active in terms of being able to respond to clear up the fly tipping. Wherever possible, we do try to identify evidence that we can then pursue and follow up, take up with them. But it isn't easy, and indeed at the minute the team is very stretched because of other environmental health and neighbourhood issues. But Councillor Mosley, I see you return, so
thank you. Apologies, councillors, because we're in lockdown here. I've got two children homeschooling on one thing and another, and it's a tricky balance. Let's put it that way, to try and get on a meeting. But you're right, Gary. The rise in fly tipping is troubling. There is a limit to what we can do. I think there is possibly an impact of the change to the household waste recycling centre click and book. I get comments from residents around here complaining about it, but I don't see that situation changing. I think the thing is we can encourage our residents to make sure, with strong messaging, that they don't give their waste to people who aren't registered waste carriers, and that's a message that we've been putting out through comms all the time. It's a message that we can reinforce through our members, and I'll urge the members on the call today to remember that, to say to if they see on their local Facebook pages with wherever they live, if people are advertising to collect stuff, just the cautionary note, pop on there, make sure they've got a waste carrier certificate, because as soon as you let that waste go from your house, you don't know where it ends up. And if it hasn't gone through a licensed waste carrier, it could be ending up in the nearest ditch. So it is a problem. And I think it's something that we bring up at the Waste Partnership, and I will bring it up again at the Waste Partnership at our next meeting.
Did we prosecute anyone last year?
We did. We prosecuted several people. Gary, could you arrange to circulate the details of the prosecutions to the members of the committee for the next, as an action point?
I'll take it away as an action. Thank you.
Thank you. And just finally, we appear to have 250-ish contaminated bins each week. Is that getting better, getting worse, and is there anything that we can do about it?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we do and we tackle on a regular basis through social media channels. A couple of years ago, last year, I think we put stickers on there saying what you could and couldn't put in your recycling bin. It's an ongoing challenge. It's not helped, again, if I refer back to what I said about packaging. People don't understand the Mobius loops and the various codes that are within there and what they can and can't put in there. So moving towards the standard common set of recyclables that we will take is a good thing to do. I think there's something I did last year, which was an eco brick I made up. So you get a Coke bottle, and the thin film plastic that you take off your, that comes with perhaps your ready meals or your or your vegetables or whatever it is, you stuff into the Coke bottle, and gradually it becomes a really solid brick, which you can then send off, and they use as a building material. So there are things that we can do to help people do that kind of thing, and maybe I know Serena knows all about that, and if Serena could perhaps put together a list of things that we could have as councillors, which we can perhaps spread the word about in terms of what you can do to reduce that contamination. That again would help. It is a constant issue, though. You're right, it does tend to be more or less the same, all the time. So, it's something that we've got to continually work on.
Thanks.
Okay, we move on. Councillor Wotton.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report, Dr. Mosley. I do have a few observations and questions, please. Regarding the dashboard revisions, as Councillor Baxter just brought up, at 2.2a, it says 2 previous years' data from April 2018 onwards. This is now included within the data set. However, due to space limitations, the printed version on the dashboards, it's not possible to see the data at once. Surely we could print another page. And I'll move on, if I may. Ashley's brought up some of the things that I was going to bring up. Some of the waste that I've seen chucked in the verges and into fields and etc. seems to me to be sort of builder's waste, and I believe those sort of people would have to have a license to actually come to what I call the tidy tip. So I think we couldn't probably eliminate all of that, but I do have complaints myself about people saying, they don't like to have to book appointments to turn up at the tip, and it's different days for different things. But I fully appreciate that's the situation that we're in at the moment. Regarding the missed bins and contaminated bins, I've still got the little wheels that Skdc produced, and perhaps it's because I'm conscientious. I always check the wheel before I put my various things into the various bins, and I still think that's a brilliant idea. And I know we put it on the papers that we send out with our bin dates, etc. But also regarding the waste performance, I'm a little bit confused, and I'm sure you can sort me out, Peter. 2.3, it says Lincolnshire County Council controls the data used for waste benchmarking, etc. But at the end, it says excluding South Kesteven District Council. So The target with the waste performance, which you've discussed with Ashley, is that our figures? Is it combined figures?
Right. Okay. I'm going to deal with that one first because I'll probably get Ben to pull in on that. But what I would imagine he's done is he's taken the Lincolnshire figures and subtracted the South Kesteven figures so that we can compare ourselves against the rest of the districts. And Ben, can you confirm that?
Yes. So
Yeah.
we're given a data set now. Previously, it was broken down by local authority. It's since been changed to tip sites, and we know much more about how and where we tip our own waste than we do what Boston or what North Kesteven does. So we've got a figure for ourselves that we're certain of, and then we have the rest of the district. So we've just had to combine them all together. We couldn't give you an accurate authority by authority breakdown. There'd be too much error built into that process. So unfortunately, we've had to combine them all.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Moving on to your point about 2A, Linda. We could put it on an extra piece of paper. Funnily enough, I was having a meeting the other day about how we could reduce printing, actually. What I'd like to see is this actually online, where you could select the dates and then compare against, because then this would answer your question. So if Councillor Baxter, for instance, wanted to look at the cyclical effect of the winter, he could select the the period to see the fluctuations, and in exactly the same way that other members could perhaps go and select the data. I think the point is you do need to be cautious, because there can be it's difficult to interpret some of this. And you can't naturally draw conclusions that you might think. So it's useful to have the discussion, if you like, with the people who know what people are doing, what people are putting in the waste, and how the whole system works. So that's useful. Was there another one that I've missed out there, Linda? I tried to pick up on what you were.
I think you've covered what I've said. I mean, I meant
the fly tipping.
Fly tipping, yeah.
Yeah, and the booking. And you're right. I don't think that's going to change. There is, I believe, an option going to be put out that certain white vans, etc., local tradesmen can buy a license to tip. Again, you'll still have to book. The fact that you can only take certain materials on certain days seems to be the big thing about about people's contention in respect of that. I don't see that the situation is going to change. It's something that we're perhaps going to have to live with, but I do share the concerns of the members with regards to that particular change on the impact on fly tipping.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mosley. I've just got another point on page 17. There's no glossary. It's in the corporate plan performance indicators, but I'm sure we can work out what LWP is Lincolnshire Waste Partnership.
Yeah, sorry.
And we've got EVCP, so I assume it's electric vehicle charging points.
It is indeed. Yeah, well done.
Right, thank you. That's my question for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on. Councillor Stevens.
Oh, sorry, I am here. I'm just trying to make my video work. Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. And thank you for having me this morning. There's a couple of things. First of all, obviously, I'd like to thank, actually, formally, Clover Townhill and her team for the really efficient way that they do actually pick up fly tipping that I am practically daily reporting, because they're really on it, and and I think we've got a great team doing that. I can't help but feel, though, that we've actually been done over, if you like, for want of a better expression, because in curtailing the wonderful facilities that were at LCC and their tips previously, and talk about, when you've got a great system going, and then, why change it? I understand with COVID that there had to be changes, but anything that is done to make something harder to do will immediately have the result in fly tipping, so that so that people will immediately think, oh, I can't go, and therefore they do fly tip. And it's not just travellers or whatever, or builders, it's a huge number of people, because they're all at it, so I do, and I'm kind of, I take your point, Peter, that we might have to live with it, but I'm not going to have to live with it. I think I won't stop saying that I think we ought to make the council run tips as accessible as possible, because while they're accessible, people will use them. If they're not using them, they're fly tipping. So LCC are making savings on their tips, and we're picking it up in terms of the people that we're sending out to pick up the fly tipping, as I see it. I think that's wrong. I think that LCC should make the tips as accessible as possible, because that really is our biggest means of stopping fly tipping. I will also flag up here at the moment that we are losing Mr. Prentice in the Deepings, who has been wonderful local, acting as a tip for many years, and he's going to be closing to the general public at the end of this month. I have already flagged that up, I know, with you, Councillor, and with Clover, but I think that will definitely result in fly tipping, which is obviously a great shame, because it's unsightly, it's unhealthy, and it costs us a hell of a lot of money to pick up. So I think that is a really important thing, and I think our relationship with LCC and I don't know whether I don't know what the kind of relationship is, and obviously I'm not on this committee normally, but I hope we do have a dialogue, and they didn't just land that on us, and I hope that going forward, when we're out of this situation, that we will get back to some sort of normality. But I feel very strongly about that. Also, moving on from that, and it's my opportunity, but I don't know where you stand with the Best Kept Village award this year, but I know we've spoken about it in the past, and I know it's something that the CPRE spearheaded. I don't know whether we've dropped that completely this year. I know that the chap that used to sort of be the champion of it sadly passed away, but this is something that that is a free facility that we have, harnessing volunteer effort to make their communities better is something that we have at our behest, free. Over the Christmas period, people in my hamlet have been going out litter picking and making, and just because we've got a strong sense of community, fortunately, where I live, but actually others that don't, and I think anything that we can do to harness that volunteer effort is well worth doing. And so I do hope that we can somehow reinstate this Best Kept Village, Best Kept Town situation, because that will, if we can galvanize action, that will be a free facility that we can have, which will support what you're doing. And I think what you're doing is, I think the big clean is coming up next, I know, on the agenda, has been absolutely fantastic, and I can't thank you enough for spearheading that and pushing that through. Everyone really appreciates it. And the other thing is that you mentioned obviously the other thing I will say is that one of the things about bin contamination is that there is a problem, I think, with people that are getting dementia as to what they put in their bins. This seems to have come up quite a few times for me. That it might be, I struggle with what to put in my bin. I never know what I'm doing really, and I have to always have a think about it. But certainly people with dementia do struggle with that, and I can't again thank this council enough for the help and also the improvement that they have had in terms of the help that they're giving people with dementia now, because there is a support mechanism that's been put in place, which I've come across recently. But that, I think, it may well be the answer to quite a lot of bin contamination. So I think anything that we can do there to help people, you know, is obviously going to help you with your contamination problem. So really, that is, I think, all I've got to say. But I'm sorry, I've used this as an opportunity to bang on about my my Best Kept Village Awards and Town Awards thing, but I don't have it very often. So thanks very much.
Yeah. Peter, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I can respond on those. Firstly, yeah, the fly tipping. I share your frustrations, Judy, and I think, you know, I've outlined already to other people that you know, the fly tipping and the and making household waste recycling accessible. You're right. It needs to be as easy as possible. When you start to put a book and tip facility in, there's no longer that spontaneity with regards to, oh, I'll just do this bit of work around the house and then I'll pop it in the car and whatever. You have to be a lot more a lot more planned about that, and perhaps, you know, that is not helping in that respect. And I also take on board the fact that Mr. Prentice is retiring, and I do hope that you know, that we don't see a big spike when he finally hangs up his cap, so to speak. But you're right, Clover and her team do an amazing job, considering you know, the issues that we're facing at the moment, especially with, you know, COVID-19, working in bubbles, making sure that we keep all of those statutory services running. So I'll pass on those comments to Judy, and I thank you for them. In terms of the Best Kept Village Award, we ran it last year, and we're going to run it again this year. I think it's one of the things that it doesn't cost us much to do. We've worked out how to do it very well. We can't do it with the CPRE anymore, and actually we approached the CPRE in the first instance to do it the first year because they had the infrastructure and the judging in place. We've since worked a way of doing that ourselves, and if you like, using that as an opportunity to do a mini audit around you know, certain areas in the rurality of the district that we wouldn't normally get to. So it's worked really well. We're looking forward to doing it again this year. Last year we gave away, there were cash prizes obviously to the parishes, and to the winners. We had some golden bins made up with the winner in the year on them, and they were very well received. I know that Irnham, a village not far from here, got one on its pride of place in there. Allington was, you know, over the moon with winning there, and you know, they obviously have a big magazine and they shout about it a lot, but plans already in place to continue that this year. And in terms of contamination, it's right that you mentioned dementia. I think there's something, you know, perhaps something we can do in terms of downloadable resources for people so that they can be put on sticker fridges and things like that. And maybe Gary can take that away as something we can look at and cost up and see if something we can do on that. I think that's a really valuable point.
Can I also mention that if you have got a family member who has dementia, that the council will pick up their bin from their house rather than from the roadside.
Sorry, yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, the assisted garden, the assisted collections are something that we do as a bin, you know, as a collection authority as well. So if you're disabled as well, it's not just dementia, it's all sorts of things. You apply for it, we go out, assess you, and then you don't have to put your bin out, and the assisted collections are noted on the in-cab system, so the guys know exactly what to do.
Yeah, it's a really good service. Thank you for that.
Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Dirks.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Yes, thank you. I welcome the dashboards, first of all. I did find little bits sort of confusing, particularly, if I might say, page 25 and 26, the sort of baseline emissions. I don't know how, you know, I find the graphs quite helpful, but I did find those pages a bit confusing. I couldn't quite follow them. Perhaps I'm a bit thick. On the fly tipping, I had got that down on my list. I'm really pleased that others have picked it up. As has been said, you know, Prentice has not been the easiest guy to deal with all the time, with the county council particularly. I remember when I was a county councillor, going back 20 years, I eventually managed to get they wanted to close him down because he wasn't applying to the rules, and the Environment Agency wanted to close him down. Eventually I managed to get I think it was the Highways Committee at the time, to actually change the rules, and we actually got him a grant to put down hard standing that the Environment Agency were demanding. But over the years, we have been, in this part of the world, really lucky, fortunate with a homegrown recycler, because that's what he is. What worries me, obviously, about Mr. Prentice, Ian Prentice, retiring, as we're all entitled to do, is what happens to our about 10 years ago, Peter, you may recall, we used to have a service down here on a Saturday where the 2 bin lorries would turn up on what we call the co-op car park, and anyone could turn up and chuck their rubbish in the bin lorries. And that was a good service. It unfortunately got withdrawn. There was concerns about the safety as well on the car park, etc. But the parish council for those years has been having a Saturday service and paying for that Saturday service for a skip at Ian Prentice's, where residents of Deep and St James can turn up and dump their unwanted things. So it is a real worry if we haven't got anywhere to put that skip, as to what, the increase in fly tipping potentially is enormous. On that though, Peter, I just wonder if I can ask the question, and if you can keep applying the pressure on the county to, I do think they got it wrong in previous lockdowns or coming out of the lockdowns as to the arrangements with the, having to have an appointment and all that. And so the question really is, what do we know what their plan is when we come out of the current lockdown? I hope they're not. I hope they are going to learn the lessons of previously and do things a bit different. Moving on, I just want to say I loved your idea about the plastic bricks. I use pop bottles, I've got to say, in the garden and for gardening purposes, mini greenhouses and all that, and actually planting in them as well. And it just sort of sparked a thought as to whether or not we should ask Serena perhaps to come up with an article for SK Today for what you can do with your plastic bottles, etc. And I think that would be useful to have something in SK Today. Finally, final point I just wanted to raise is on the baseline emissions. And I know previously we've looked at and we've said that bin lorries are very hard to electrify, and obviously they're looking at cars and things first. But I was on a Energy Saving Trust webinar the other day, and the gentleman on there highlighted the fact that bin lorries are now becoming the focus of some of the big manufacturers, and Mercedes and Dennis now do a much uprated electric bin lorry. And he pointed out that when you've got bin lorries that only do 2, maximum 4 miles to a gallon on the diesel, they are big emitters of carbon. And he mentioned that Nottingham, Cambridge and Manchester particularly, are buying 30 of these new ones that are available. So it sounds as if they have made a lot of progress on the batteries on them. I just wondered, Peter, when ours are coming up for renewal, I know it's something you're looking at, but is there any? What's your view on those new ones? Are they worth us looking at? Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, and good to see you. And I don't class you as being stupid at all, from what you said earlier, not at all. I think, can I do the bin lorries first with you? because that's an interesting one. I think the thing about places like Manchester and the urban centres are that actually the routes are relatively limited in terms of their distance. They collect an awful lot of waste in a very short amount of time. And when you move to the 300 and whatever square miles of South Kesteven, if you've got to get from from a depot in Grantham down to Market Deeping or whatever, the challenges are immense. The costs are also immense as well. And actually, I think as a council, we need to think about this very much with a very open mind. I'm glad that you went on the webinar with the Energy Saving Trust. The thing that has come out of a lot of this development is actually the thought that maybe electric won't be the end point. That there will be something else after that. And when you think about our replacement cycle, we've got a capital replacement programme for the RCVs, and we will change our RCV fleet. It will be refreshed in total every 8 or 9 years. So it takes a long time to do that, and it costs a huge amount of money. So actually, we're thinking now that is it wise to go down the electric route, bearing in mind we have that rural area here, or is it better to wait until that technology has taken that one step further forward to what it's likely to be in the future? So it's one of those things where we have to be mindful that we might be better off waiting in this particular instance, specifically because of the because of how our district works and the distances that have to be gone. If I take our experiences with electric vehicles on the fleet, for example, the 2 Renault Zoes that we got, we bought them when we replaced about 2 or 3 years ago now. And the range that we get out of them is far lower than we'd expected. And that's the thing with electric. You think you're going to get something because it's a bit like MPG figures, isn't it, in cars? The manufacturers always tell you you're going to get more, and I've yet to meet somebody who's actually managed to get what they say you're going to get. Or you've got to be, a particularly special driver to get what they say. And I think that's the thing, with this is that the figures say what it's going to be, but is it likely that you're going to get that? And of course, what's the impact on the service if you don't get that? So we have to be really careful about that. But I welcome the fact that you're on the. Sorry about that. The doorbell's gone and I can't stop it. But it's it's an interesting one to remember that.
No,
if I
thanks for your reply on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of the plastics, I'm glad to, I think there's work that we can do on there with regards to that. But I wanted to just bring up the point that you made about 10 years ago. I wasn't actually a district councillor 10 years ago, which I was, to be fair, but I
Councillor Wotton again.
Thank you, Chairman. Oh, sorry, I can't start the video, and it's a bit of a madhouse here as well. We've just had a flood in the kitchen and domestic engineer here, so just bear with me. Phil, Councillor Dilks brought up something I thought was quite valid regarding the district commissions. I looked at the paper and I thought, oh my God, what's all that about? Perhaps Gary or somebody or you, Dr. Mosley, could just explain, like, let's go for the bin lorry bit. If you can explain that piece there, it says 2033, means nothing to me. Fleet CO2e, and then we've got red 6.02%. If somebody could explain that to me. And why have we got this scatter diagram here when it said 2017? And you know, I looked at it and it says agriculture, forestry, stationary and energy, and I thought, oh my gosh, what's going on here? If you could quickly explain some of that for me, thank you.
Well, what I'll do is with the scatter, that's I think the latest available data. So scatter is an online resource where we can look at what the whole emission balloon is, if you like. If you look at the district as a whole in terms of residential, agricultural, transport, etc., what it does is it lumps together all of the things that cause emissions and then gives you that figure of what the total is, and then that then allows you to look at what we do as a district in the perspective of the total. So so when you look at the total tons for South Kesteven is what 1,123,719 tons of carbon. When we look at our footprint, which is 7,600, it puts into perspective the impact that we will have by becoming net zero compared to the whole of the districts, and that's the thing that you can look at. But also there are things within there that you can see. Stationary energy, for example, is home heating, for example. Yeah, so you can see how many tons, and actually, we might want to focus messages with regards to encouraging people to insulate their lofts and all of that kind of stuff, and encouraging people to take up the grants and that kind of thing. So that's what that does. In terms of the baseline, can I pull on to Serena so that she can just explain it to you, because she'll probably do it better than I will.
That was great explanation anyway. Thank you, Dr. Mosley. That's good.
Yeah, Serena's going to come on and just do about this is page 25, Serena.
Sure. Morning all. Just so I'm looking at the right page, are we looking at the baseline emissions section that has the little
page
icon?
26 here, Dr. Mosley.
I've got two pages with it. You've got 2018, 19, 2019. Well, yeah, sorry, yeah. It's on both pages. So 2019, 20. It doesn't really matter which one you do, because I think the principle will be the same, won't it, Serena?
Yeah. So I'll look at the 2019-20 one just in terms of keeping it short. So what we are trying to do here is look at the carbon emissions of the district in terms of of the council, which is 7,600 tonnes of our baseline, and understand for the 2019-20 year, which is the subsequent financial year, how much things have changed. So we can see in the middle we've got a big sort of green figure that shows that we have a 6% overall reduction in carbon emissions, which is against of course our target of at least 30% by the end of the decade. So quite good progress, I'd say, for one financial year. And within this, sort of following feedback from a workshop we had late last year, and we've broken that down into categories. So on the left side, we've got our hotspot categories, which is the vast majority of the council's emissions. So that's the leisure centres, our fleet, gas and electric used in our buildings, and for streetlights. So you can see there we've had a fairly significant decrease in the electricity, the carbon resulting from that used in buildings and for streetlights. And a quite significant reduction in from the leisure centres as well. But on the other hand, a little bit of an increase in fleet, more miles travelled, and gas used in our buildings. So the idea really is to sort of show where things have changed sort of year on year, we will be comparing ourselves to the baseline information, which is the previous page. That's sort of static and fixed now. We will always be comparing ourselves to that, understanding how things have changed. And we will be putting together the information for sort of the subsequent 2021 year once we have that, and expecting quite a lot of changes there as well because of the various lockdowns. So more significant decreases, I'd say, from that year. So if anyone has any particular questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those as best I can.
Thank you for that, Serena. On my behalf, I think that's quite interesting because you've explained it, and it would have been quite nice if we'd had a little bit of a presentation so it gave us more of an insight into that information. Instead of you can sort of see too much and it gets confusing and then you dismiss it. But thank you to Dr. Mosley and yourself. Thank you.
Okay, we move on. Councillor Crawford.
Hello, thank you. Just try and get me video started. Yeah, it's to do with the tips, really. I think the booking is good because people don't have to wait, but it's that you can only bring things on certain days. If they changed it, that you could take anything down as long as you booked, that would help no end. So there's still a booking system, so everybody can still stay safe, but just allow people to bring everything that they want on one visit.
And that, thank you, Helen. I mean, that point's been made to LCC and will continue to be made.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have a recommendation. That's that we approve the revised dashboards and continue to support the ongoing transformation of performance reporting. Is everybody happy with this? If no one's indicate in the chat box if you're not happy with this particular approval. Okay, I take that as being carried, and we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Councillor Baxter has put a message in the chat box about that.
He's not happy. Oh, sorry, you're not happy. In what way?
The dashboard, I mean, it's better than what we've had in the past, but I think the timescales are so varied and the information so limited. I think we should allow ourselves to go onto a separate page. If you look at the dashboard, without getting all the way back into it, and I'm trying to find the dashboard on my sheet. One of the measures goes from, I think, November, and one from December, and one from January. We've got no historical context, so we can't compare year on year. We can't compare the kind of cycles year on year. So the data is limited. I mean, what I'm going to do after the meeting is go to the team and ask for the baseline data, because if you want to compare, for example, fly tipping or waste collected to see if we're getting better or worse over a period of more than 18 months, you can't see it from this, and you've got no chance of seeing it from this, nor is the that 41% that we drew attention to, which was unclear. I mean, I'd prefer to see whether or not the annual recycling figure was getting better or worse, and at the moment we can only see what the figure is. So that's why I'm unhappy. But I mean, I don't want to halt the progress to the meeting. I'm just saying that I think there's still some work to do on this yet.
Could I just reiterate? Actually, I agree with you. The recommendation was to support the ongoing transformation of performance reporting, which is, in fact, taking on board what you've just said and trying to make this, this performance measurement reporting better. So I'd hope you'd support that.
Yeah, sorry, I would support that. That wasn't the question that was asked, and I didn't have the right piece of paper in front of me because of the thing. So yeah, I think what the chair asked was, are we all happy with the dashboards in front of us? The answer is no. Are we happy that we continue to improve them? Yes, I'm more than happy.
I apologise, I thought that's what I said. But I must admit, Peter, in the notes it does say that there is 2 years worth of data. I take it that's included in the dashboard We're just only seeing.
Yeah, I mean, there are constraints with what you can get on the sheet of paper that makes it meaningful. That's that's the thing. You say, well, let's put it on a different sheet. If we're going to have paper versions, then yes, we would. I just think there might be a better alternative in terms of in terms of perhaps online, where you can just click on the graph and ping it's there. And I'd hope that.
I can totally agree. I think all this information should be online. And all the performance indicators for all the committees should be available online, and I've certainly asked for it, and you probably have too. But that's a work in progress. If we're talking about saving paper, there are other places we can save paper before we start looking at an extra sheet on this one. Sorry, Chair. Please move on. We could be.
So, we have a recommendation. Is everybody happy to approve the recommendation?
Yes.
Right, we'll move on then. That's approved. We move on to item 7, performance indicators. Councillor Mosley, would you like to introduce us again?
Oh, because it's not my report.
Hi, sorry, it's Kent Lyon here. I'm talking through the report on behalf of the leader, I believe.
Ah, okay, sorry.
So yeah, no, that's great.
Okay.
So no, thank you, and it's really interesting to hear that last discussion as well, because obviously the performance indicators for the corporate plan interact quite strongly with the dashboards anyway, and designed to complement. So what this report sets out are the proposed draft performance indicators and targets for the South Kesteven Corporate Plan 2020 to 23, which was approved at full council on the 1st of October. Just as a reminder, the corporate plan not only sets out the vision for South Kesteven to be the best place in which to live, to work and visit. It also sets out the 5 priorities, which are growth in our economy, housing that meets the needs of all residents, healthy and strong communities, a clean and sustainable environment, and a high performing council. And under each of these priorities is a number of actions that the council is planning to deliver between now and 2023. And for these actions to be meaningful, it's important that there are performance indicators and targets that demonstrate whether delivery is on track or not, and we're going to achieve the intention and the action. So the intention is that the scrutiny committees will receive regular reports monitoring this performance that will basically start from Q1 of next year, and therefore this report proposes indicators and targets for the actions that fall within the scope of this scrutiny committee. Unsurprisingly, all of the actions for the environment OSC fall under the clean and sustainable environment priority, and they focus largely around the following areas: so tackling climate change, clean streets and neighbourhoods, parks and open spaces, and environmentally friendly modes of transport. And just to say as well that because of the nature of the actions in the corporate plan, the way in which the KPIs are presented or will be monitored will vary. So, for example, there's quantifiable KPIs, which basically where we, for example, increasing the proportion of recycling from 40 to 45% over a phased period, or project milestones, which are like the green flag status is an example of that, or milestones that will be agreed after an initial action or review, and the food waste review is an example of that. As I say, the plan is these will be recorded quarterly where appropriate. Obviously, there's some cases where data isn't available quarterly, but where possible they'll be reported quarterly to the committee, and there'll be an annual performance report that goes to the relevant OSCs and ultimately to Cabinet, and that will cover also any changes to KPIs or measures. So as you know, and as has been expressed before, putting this in place will be a big step for South Kesteven in embedding a golden thread approach to performance management. And there's a couple of officers, Ben Russell, who was also involved in the last report, and Kate Taylor, who've been really key in getting to this stage. So I just wanted to thank them and for their involvement. And as I say, the main, this report is meant to complement, not compete with, the previous performance report, and this focuses purely on actions in the corporate plan. So I'll stop talking now and hand over for questions. But basically, if there's questions about the process and how things will work going forward, I'll answer those. If there's questions about individual KPIs, Peter or Gary will probably be best placed to answer them. So I'll hand over now.
Okay, Councillor Wilton, you'd like to ask a question?
That was quick, Chairman. Thank you. Yes, I like this, Ken. Really good. But I've got a couple of things I'd like to pick up with you, please.
Yep.
On page 38.4, it's a snapshot. It says just over 1,400 households were on the council's housing register in 2019. Why couldn't we quote 2020?
Is that from the corporate plan document?
It's a pretty picture, and it says snapshot of South Kesteven. It's a picture of a map of England, and then there's some figures in there.
So that's because the corporate plan was published in October 2020. So that's appended as a document that was approved at full council then. So that was a point in time. So any sort of revised iterations, if we do a refresh in a year or 2 years time, then we'll obviously update all the figures within it. But that's attached an appendix to this report because the appendix B is kind of the detail of is the kind of focus of this report. But it's referring to that document, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense, Ken. Thank you. And on page 45, it's healthy and strong communities on key achievements. It's in red on our copy, and it's the third bullet point down, and it says helped attract over 2.5 million of additional funds for community and voluntary groups in South Kesteven via the SK Community Fund. And in brackets, it says representing a 750% return on the council's investment. Can you just explain to me how?
So I can explain to you in principle how. The detail Carol Draw will need to be able to answer, but we can pick up after this room. But effectively the SK Community Fund has been able to support voluntary groups. It's leveraged in other funding from other places, so it's been the kind of it's been the catalyst to receiving other funding. So it can have been as part of a jigsaw of external funding or match funding different things. So that's at a high level, that's how that would have worked. But at a detailed level, Carol has a document that she'll be able to share that shows how that's been worked out. But that's so I think that actually falls in scope of Rural Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So quite happy to discuss that offline or share it with you. But I can pick that up with Carol if that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at pages 55 and 56 because the corporate plan, we've already seen that, haven't we? That's nothing new. But am I right in thinking that the pages 55 and 56, which are the indicators, they are like a new addition to the corporate plan mechanism?
Yeah, sorry, I should have made that clear in my intro. This is the indicators for the Environment Committee are the kind of the purpose for bringing it to this committee and kind of meet to the report.
Yeah, and thank you for doing so, because it's. I mean, we've come such a long way from the under a previous regime, if I might call it that, when we had all the pictures of lizards and panda bears and such like, and nothing. It was all a bit intangible. This is clearly we can measure ourselves on some things, and that's great. So I've only got I've got three that I want to comment on. The first one is number one. We've got the target for April 21, 22 and 23, and it says it's going to be non-linear and it will vary, but sooner or later we're going to have to put a target on. I mean, I think it would be reasonable to have a target of not going, having a 3-year average of lower than the baseline. Otherwise, we'll get to 2030 and we'll say, "Oh, crumbs! We've been non-linear for so long that we haven't hit the target." So we've got, not exactly sure how to do it, but we've got to have a direction of travel within that indicator, so that we can show that we're doing ongoing progress. It's not made easier by COVID, because obviously this year we've had a very good year in terms of carbon emissions, but for all the wrong reasons. My second comment is on number 4, which is for the green flag status. I think that the SK owned and managed park in Deeping St James, Jubilee Park, I know that the local participants are planning a flagpole. I think that would be possibly easier to achieve and equally welcome to put to try and achieve green flag status for Jubilee Park. Don't be tempted to think that it's too small, because I know that in Hunstanton there's a much smaller park which has green flag status, and it can be a tourist attraction. You can look at these green flag parks on tourist maps, and it can be a kind of addition to the tourism offer for the area. And Jubilee Park is a lovely park, as I'm sure nobody would deny. Finally, on number 8. Number 8 looks like a fudge. We're talking about food waste. So we in year 1 we're going to have a food waste review to see if we can do it, and then based on the review we might do it. I understand the conundrum, because the county don't want to pay for it, but we love it. And it's worth doing in terms of recycling. So, it just looks a little. That's not really a measurable target. Maybe the year 1 is to undertake the review. But if the review says, "Sorry, lads, but it's completely unaffordable," then that kind of messes up the following years. One more thing on item 6. I can't remember from the last item. We are talking about 46 tonnes per 1,000 households. On our dashboard that we've just discussed at length, does it tell us how many tonnes per 1,000 households we're currently achieving? And if so, was it more or less than 46,000 tonnes? Sorry, 46 tonnes per 1,000 households. Thank you.
Peter, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I was going to say you probably want me to kick off on that one. Can I start on the food waste? Ashley, appreciate your thoughts on that. It's a bit like pushing treacle uphill with food waste, because it's one of those things that it costs at the collection and all the benefits of the disposal, and at the end of the day, we have to try and work out the best way of doing it. At some point, we will be compelled to do it. I'm absolutely certain of that. So what we want to do there within that KPI, we recognise that it's the right thing to do, because it could increase our recycling rate by up to 13% just overnight if you started doing it. So it's not it's not the wrong ambition to have, but it is a difficult one, and I'm continuing to work with my team to work out a way where we can try and get I mean, we don't have any money to collect it. That's the trouble. It's about paying for it. So I'm continually trying to work out a way in which I can make this revenue neutral. And that's a real challenge. And it's one that I don't want to give up on. Many people would have just thrown in a towel by now, and I'm not going to, I'm afraid, because I think that this is the right thing to do. So that's where I am on that. And do you know what? Yeah, it might be a bit of a fudge, will appear a bit of a fudge, but that's the ambition. And I'd like it to reflect the ambition. And I think as a council, we should have that ambition. That's all. on that one. In terms of the waste partnership, I'm moving backwards because I've got the page turned over now. The 46 to reduce the residual by 46 tonnes per 1,000 households. It's a bit of an interesting measure, that it's because of the number of households. Basically, I think that on average a household currently disposes through residual around about 1,100 kilograms, so 1.1 tonnes a year. Yeah. So effectively we need to get everybody's waste down by 46 kilos a year, or 50 odd kilos a year. Does that make sense? So we want to try and get people to reduce that residual income, and of course we'll get those figures through the dashboard in terms of the weights and the tonnages. Yeah.
Surely that figure. Do we not have a figure for that already?
Well, it's the way that the partnership measures it across the way, and it perhaps needs clarifying really, and putting into the context of South Kesteven in terms of the number there, so that we can, because we know roughly what on average what our households throw away in terms of their weight annually, yeah, in the bins, and actually it needs to be transferred to per household average, so that we can understand what what we're trying to get people to reduce. Does that make sense?
Yes, because what you just said was just over a tonne per household per year. So that would that not be 52 tonnes per 1,000 households?
You're asking me to do maths on a Tuesday. Actually, sorry, my head's full. I think what we're talking about is 46 tonnes per 1,000 households. So it's just a multiplication factor. It equates, an order of magnitude. It's basically saying 46 kilos per household if there's a tonne per household, isn't there? Does that make sense? It's just
the 46 kilos. Is that per week or per year or per month?
Well, that would be per year, which is not a huge amount, to be fair. But that's what I mean. I think it needs transposing into a per household figure for South Kesteven. So that it's more meaningful, and then relates back to the dashboard issue that we're talking, to the dashboards that we presented in the previous article.
So now we're on the same page. Based on current available information, we can't see if these targets are meaningful or not.
These targets, well, I think they're meaningful. I think they express a reduction in the amount of waste that we want from people. So we're reinforcing the reduce. I think perhaps we could do some work looking at what South Kesteven specifically do, in terms of our residents, and perhaps saying, well, what do we think we could achieve in terms of that reduction? An interesting thing is that in relation to that, work with the pace to reduce and further improve recycling. So that's basically, in recycling. So we'd have to split out the recycling. So again, I think it's more pertinent that perhaps we do some work to make sure that KPI reflects the average recycling volume per tonne. So it's actually going to be a bit more than that per household, actually, because the amount of recycling that you get from a household is a lot less than the residual currently. Yeah.
Yeah.
It needs clarification. I agree. I think that's where we go on that. And in terms of the green parks, there are some small parks that have great green flag status. It's a lot of work to get a green flag. Don't underestimate that. That's why we put. With Jubilee Park in mind, that's why we put in there other relevant areas in that respect, because there are loads of little parks around the district that could be candidates for for this kind of thing. I think it's interesting to note that the green flag system has lots of different categories as well. So it's not, yes, you can get a green flag park status, but they have other categories as well that might be appropriate in the short term. So we're not close to the idea at all, Ashley. I think it's a good point that you make. There was the carbon footprint, wasn't there? On the carbon footprint, we've got 190 tonnes a year. I think having the tracker, linking it into that dashboard and seeing how we're performing. Some of these things are going to be step changes, aren't they? So for example, changing the fleet of vehicles to hydrogen, perhaps for waste, which will happen, after significant investment. But you'll start to see that occur. Changes in leisure provision, for example. So a more energy efficient leisure centre in the Deepings would have a step change impact on that. and drop that down. So yeah, I think tracking whether or not you're doing better or worse than you should be doing is important, but having in our minds the fact that we may do less well one year in anticipation of doing exceptionally well the next year should be at the forefront. And I agree that COVID's had an impact that is going to make things difficult to understand, and we do have to have that in our minds when we contextualise this moving forwards for the next couple of 3 years for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that's everybody. Does anybody else want to ask a question? Nope. Okay, well, we've got a couple of recommendations. Is everybody happy with them? Okay, in that case, do we recommend them? Anybody against them? Nope, carried then.
Thanks very much.
Item 8, which I believe is yours again, Peter. You're having a busy day again.
I always seem to have a busy day, which is the big clean. Is Ian on the call, Gary?
I don't believe he is, Peter, but I'm happy to cover or for you to start off.
No, I'll cover it off then. I thought he was going to come and because I mean people have heard me talk about the big clean, you know, for years and years and years, and this is just an update. And I thought it would be better coming perhaps from the operational aspect. But the report before you is a presentation on the big clean scheme post COVID-19 restrictions. So you know what we've got here is. If we move on to the aim of the big clean, we already knew that we invested in getting our district up to a higher level of street scene standard, addressing all of the grot spots of every area of the district as best as we could. We put in a significant amount of investment in to do that, and then subsequent to that, reducing the investment, but basically having top-up crews out there to try and keep that standard high. Once you do a deep clean of an area, it should then be cheaper and more efficient to keep topping it up year on year. I'll take on board the sort of things that Judy Stevens mentioned earlier about the big clean and the success. It's one of those aspects of the work that the council does that pretty much every area of the district sees. So there are very few things that we do as a district that everybody gets the same view of. Waste collection obviously is one of them, because everybody gets their bins emptied. But the big clean is something where all of the rural areas get to see, that street standard as well. So I think it's done a good job in doing that. But one of the other things that it needed to do was, a cleaner district is a more attractive district, and it's to attract investment within and make our towns and villages places that people want to live, work, and visit. Historically, this was all about the national standards and the guidance. There is a national street scene standard, but with investing so much money, we wanted to develop a higher standard, which as part of the big clean we did. So we aim to make sure that our streets were of a better standard than other places and above the national standard, so that we weren't just along with everybody else, so that there was something that we could measure against as well. If we move on to page 8 in terms of examples. In terms of the national standard, for example, there's no requirement or advice on weed spraying or removal, but we have our own specialist team attending to spray and then follow up with weed ripping. So we've got those weed rippers that come out and really take the roots out and make a big difference. Again, with a lot of areas of street scene, there is no actual requirement. There's just general advice. And we wanted to make sure that we tackle some of these things on board. And I think, I'm really pleased that the members of the council across the whole spectrum have been really supportive of the programme. They've all seen the benefit of it, and they've all contributed to saying where, things need doing better, and what we can do to sort of help that. So in terms of, if I move on to the teams and what they do, if you've been out and seen them, obviously you'll have seen a lot of this. If you haven't been out and seen them, go onto the SKDC website and go and have a look at their schedule, because if they're coming near to you, get yourself out there and go and have a look and see what they do. They're a great bunch of people and they work really, really hard. But they wash down roadsides, benches, litter bins in the town centres. Again, there's the weed rippers with regards to that. Where possible, they'll cut back the overgrowth vegetation that encroaches on the footpaths, so you get nice clean edges and you recover the whole of the footpath again. Power washing pavements, road signs, etc., and removing the graffiti. They're also our eyes and ears out on the street as well. They give us an indication of what people, they'll feed back other issues that they're not equipped to deal with back to the teams, so that issues can be dealt with in a timely manner. And of course, this communication it crosses over a number of areas, because I alluded earlier to the best kept village, and our judges that go out and look, they're also looking at that, at the district and seeing what areas we need to improve on and feeding that back in. So hopefully everybody talks to each other and we get out there and deal with these issues quickly. I think that's that's been highlighted again by Judy Stevens, who mentioned about how quickly Clover's team pick up fly tipping, for example. Again, we work with LCC Highways to get hedges cut back where they're obstructing pavements and the like, tree branches, and of course we have our own road sweepers, so we mechanically sweep the roads as well. We do also work and pass on this information and work as far as possible with LCC with regards to their gully emptying programme and also their footpath weed spraying, so we try and coordinate where possible. So the detailed schedules, well, there's an example on one of your slides, so you can go and see what it is, but you can always go and find out where they're going to be on the SKDC websites. But always remember that the team are there so that they can also provide the council with some flexibility. So at this particular time, for example, in COVID, a lot of the Big Clean team were reassigned in the first lockdown to other street scene duties like loading on the RCVs, so that we could maintain the bubbles and all of that kind of stuff. So actually having the Big Clean teams has paid real benefits at this time of national emergency, if you like, and they continue to do that. Equally, we're out there, for example, helping with regards to the vaccination centres and all of that kind of stuff as well, along with our other partner organisations, so Environment SK and the like. So really, this is one huge team really that's just working together to make sure that we can work better and be cleaner and tidier. So you've got on page 12 an example where you can see where they're going to be. Again, fairly self-explanatory. We've got market deeping on there, so you'll be able to see where they are. That only goes up to the last Friday. It would have been helpful if they'd have put on this slide actually where we were going to be with the meeting, wouldn't it? So that we could have said, well, you could nip out today, but nevertheless, that's the way it is. So the Big Clean had 7 or 8 big teams. We hired a lot of equipment in, and then after that initial Big Clean, we've moved down to 2 main teams. Now those 2 teams are Big Clean's little brother and sister is what we call them, in the operations side of things. So there are 5 people in each team. They have access to, so there's a graffiti pressure washer vehicle with each one. They all have access to weed rippers, leaf blowers and strimmers. And then the one large road sweeper splits between the 2 teams, because what tends to happen is the teams go and they'll scrape out the gullies and this, that, and the other, and create the gutter sweepings for the road sweeper. And then the road sweeper comes along at the end of the day or during the day and then sweeps up what they've prepared, leaving the area nice and tidy. So we've got those 2 teams, and sometimes for the bigger areas they work together, but quite often they're in different places as well. So we've got some before and after shots, just to give you an example. So on page 15, you've got that bench with the overgrown paved area, and then on the following page you've got after the Big Clean team have been there, and I think it's noticeable the work that they do, and it's this kind of attention that helps keep us it helps keep the community nice. So lots of befores and afters. Graffiti is a slightly harder one. I know that we've had a few issues. Generally speaking, sometimes you can get the graffiti off, sometimes you just have to paint over. So it's kind of a bit of a tricky one in that respect. But hopefully from the presentation you can gather. I think the page 22 and 23 is a nice one, because that's one of our housing developments. I think that's Riverside, I think, there was a lot of detritus there, hadn't been terribly well maintained, and we got asked to go in there and change it. And we also attended that site at the same time with ESK to do grounds as well, transformed the area, and consequently I'm led to believe that that area is now being kept up by the residents, in fact, and they're really looking after it. So it's one of those things that if you can do it well, you give people an ownership in the area that they live, and they tend to help keep that area tidy moving on, which of course reduces the burden on us and allows us to go and tackle some of the harder areas later on. So I think I'll leave it there. Many of you will already know about the big clean anyway, so this is just a reporting update, and there's every ambition to maintain the big clean moving forward. I think it's one of those things that I constantly get people saying you've got to keep doing it, and I push every year to make sure that we can. Thank you.
Okay, Gloria, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Peter Mosley. I think the big clean is one of the biggest assets of this council, because it is so noticeable and people see it all the time, and it shows our residents that we actually care. There is one area that I wondered if the big clean had any input into, and that is private accommodation where their hedges come into the pavement all the time. Now, I've had a couple of incidences where people haven't been able to get past with the pushchairs. I have brought it up at the council. They send them a letter and they take a little bit off the hedge, and that's about it. But it is really about, it needs about a foot, 18 inches taken off, because it's invaded the pathway that much, and then it's let to go. Is there anything that the big clean can do about them sort of instances, or is it just our own properties?
Right, with regards to private hedges overhanging, I did allude to it within the presentation actually. We're not allowed to cut people's private hedges back, but what we do is we pass that information on to LCC Highways, and they can issue notices advising the residents to take the hedge back. If they don't take it back, they can actually go in there and enforce it and take it back themselves, and put a charge on the owner as well. So there are mechanisms to do it, but they're with LCC Highways, well, Gloria.
They do that, Peter. But what actually happens is they take it on board, and as I say, they cut a little bit off, and show that they've done something, but they don't do enough. Is there any way that can be advanced to make them actually do what's necessary?
Well, as I say, that's the responsibility of LCC Highways. So once we've passed that information on, it's for them to do. We're not allowed to cut people's hedges back, but LCC Highways can.
Is it possible for you to let me know who I contact with regard to that? Have you any idea? I'll read them myself.
I'll have Gary pass the information on to you.
Bless you. Thank you very much, Peter, and well done. It's absolutely cracking what they do, and they're a nice bunch of people as well.
Lovely people, yeah.
Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Wootton.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Mosley. I think people have already said it. This is an absolutely brilliant idea that somebody came up with, and it's really well appreciated out in the community. If I can just comment on what Councillor Johnson's just asked you, being a dual-hatted person, we do get frustrated on both sides of the fence with this, and as a county councillor it is really difficult. Dr. Mosley's already said, you know, what you need to do. You need to speak to your local county councillor, but it's really difficult to get people to do this, to cut their stuff back off the encroachment onto the highway. And there are ways and means. I mean, it's even could be the case that I go and knock on somebody's door and I ask them politely, because I've had complaints, would they mind cutting it back? And 9 times out of 10, if you're very lucky, it's a little trim. And as Dr. Mosley's already said, although there are big clean teams out there, they can't actually do that because it needs to go through highways. So it's a bit of a difficult one. But my question to you, Peter, is do you actually operate the big clean on my area, which is the Belmont ward, which is a parish ward?
Yeah. If it's in South Stephen, then you'll get attendance by the big cleaner. It'll be on the schedule. I doubt we've missed it off. I notice Ian's on the call now. Do you want to just comment on that, Ian?
Yes, Councillor. The every area should be covered off at some point during the year. If you've got a particular area that needs attention, what would always is advise is just let us know where that is, and we'll make sure that we get it scheduled in.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much to you both. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Crawford.
Hello, thank you. Sorry, I can't get my video camera to work. Just going back to what Gloria said, you can go, if you've got a smartphone, you can go on Fix My Street with LCC and report any overgrown hedges, and they do send them letters, and it does work, because I've reported several and they have been trimmed right back. What you've got to do is just keep on and on and on. Keep on reporting it. That's all you can do. Eventually somebody at LCC will get fed up and really write a strong worded letter. Thank you.
Okay, having said that, well then, if nobody else wants to speak, we'll move on to item 9. Serena Brown. Serena?
Serena, I've unmuted you. You should be able to speak now.
Sorry, I was just having a little problem with my internet connection. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sure. So I believe we're on the item that looks at the presentation I prepared earlier in the year. Is that correct?
The one to do with cycling, yes, the travel survey.
Yes. So just a little bit of a summary. In last February, so I appreciate that's almost a year ago now, we did a very brief survey of Skdc staff to understand how people travelled to work, and some of the interest at the time that informed this survey was around how many staff choose to cycle to work, and the uptake of the staff cycle to work scheme, which offers a little bit of a sort of financial support for people interested in buying a bike or cycling equipment. So obviously the caveat to this is that this was sort of early February, it was pre-COVID, and things have changed quite drastically since then, as we all know. But I still think it's an interesting snapshot of sort of staff travel behaviour at the time. Sort of some of the things that we asked were, staff travel mode, sort of miles travelled, that sort of thing. So if we want to have a look at page 70 of the agenda pack, I think that's quite a helpful summary. So it shows us that at the time surveyed, the majority of staff travelled 5 miles or less, 56%, and 43% of staff travelled more than 5 miles. Now, obviously, this is a large factor in terms of if you're able to walk or cycle to work. Sort of official guidance is if it's over 5 miles, it's very unlikely someone will choose to cycle or walk. And if we look at the next page, 71, we can see distance and travel choice. So in the less than 5 miles cohort, there's around an even split of people who walk to work and people who drive to work, and then a little sort of collection of people who car share, sort of around 8% of people who cycle as part of their journey, and then a proportion of people working from home. And then in the more than 5 miles cohort, naturally you have many more people driving to work, only a small sliver of people walking and cycling, But interestingly, and sort of the train as well is a bigger portion of those that travel more than 5 miles. And again, bearing in mind this is February, but we have around the same proportion of staff who reported as part of a typical week working from home. That was about the same for people less and more than 5 miles. So obviously we've got more variety of travel choice in the less than 5 miles cohort, and that's the cohort that is able to consider sort of walking and cycling options as well. So page 73, I just put together a short summary of how the travel behaviours of Skdc staff compare to a national average, albeit this data is from 2011, so a little bit out of date, but based on the national census, so the highest quality data we're able to get. And we can see that actually in terms of drivers, we have fewer than you might expect. And in terms of pedestrians, a little bit more. Cyclists is about average, and then quite a few more people travelling by train than the regional average might expect. I included a little bit of information on the context for cycling, which was quite heavily discussed at the last meeting of the presentation to Sustrans, but just sort of in brief, basically, obviously there's a great carbon incentive for cycling and for reducing the miles that people drive in general, and that we need to sort of do what we can within our district to encourage people to sort of drive fewer miles and consider other options where they're able to as well. So moving on to the last slide, I just put together some suggestions of if there was a significant interest in encouraging staff to travel by bike, some things that we might want to consider, but bearing in mind sort of the focus of this piece is around cycling more generally. I appreciate the conversation might be a little bit more wide than what we can do to encourage Skdc staff. So I hope that was a useful overview. I appreciate that information is a little bit out of date, but hopefully it gives some context into what staff behaviours were and what we can expect them to be sort of post pandemic when we get there. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. I don't know if the committee wants to ask questions first of this presentation and then open it up to include the presentation that we originally had last meeting, and then come up with some recommendations to pass forward. Is everybody happy with that idea? Okay. Let's start in. Councillor Baxter, I take it you've got some questions with reference to the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for clarifying how we're going to how you're going to handle the agenda. On this presentation, the elephant in the room, I guess, is how it's changed since February last year. I mean, it's great that we got it in February, because it would have been a very different picture in April or May, and possibly in terms of staff travel. The bigger opportunity is perhaps not just encouraging cycling to work, but taking advantage of what we've learned in terms of home working and telecommuting and Zoom meetings and so on from this episode. So I wondered if anybody in authority, probably Councillor Mosley, can comment on how we're going to, or how we're planning to retain the advantages that COVID has given us in terms of reducing staff mileage.
I'm happy to comment. Actually, I mean, we're still in a lockdown, so we we do need to look at it, and I think. I mean, I'd like to be pragmatic about it in terms of I think that there are opportunities for us to reduce use the online meetings. And in fact, we've invested with the in the chamber technology so that we can combine Zoom with certain councillors that want to perhaps go into the chamber and have meetings when we come out of the other side of that, the public eye system, and we'll be able to stream our meetings on there. In terms of the way that we're working, I'd like to see an option for all of our officers to do some home working and some office working. I think it's really important for officers to see other people at times. Us being in lockdown at home at the moment and whatever, it's all well and good for reducing travel, etc. But I think some people do struggle with that. And it is important that we still interact with each other at certain times. And there are certain things that we'll want to do, where meetings will really need to be, need to be had face to face, so to speak. I'm all for doing as much as we can, mindful of the impact on the well-being of staff and the well-being of members as well. So really, it's it's up for members to sort of input into what they'd like to see. I think there will be a reduction, and we'll just have to take it from there.
So will we get a new policy? I mean, I think we're agreed that there are advantages and disadvantages of working from home, as we've seen during virtually every meeting. I mean, there's issues of connectivity and other things happening in the background, but what I definitely wouldn't want to see, putting aside, I mean, in terms of members going up to Grantham and back, I don't mind not going to Grantham as often as I used to, but in terms of staff, I wouldn't want to get to the end of this episode and then say, right, everybody back to work as normal. We want to be able to see you at your desk. We want you to be available for meeting in conference room 1 every Friday afternoon. I think that would be a mistake to go back to that. So there's somewhere in between, but presumably a policy on staff working from home and attendance at meeting either virtually or non-virtually, that will have to come out sooner or later, and I wonder who will take responsibility for that. Presumably the chief executive or the deputy/assistant chief executive.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, that's HR related, isn't it? I think Gary wants to come in on here perhaps and speak on that. Is that right, Gary?
Yes, Peter, with your permission, Chairman. You're quite right, Councillor Baxter. I mean, this is something that's been active consideration, both with Karen and with the leader. As Councillor Mosley's alluded, I think what's most likely, nothing's finalised, but what's most likely is a hybrid approach, and it will perhaps vary service to service. The vast majority of staff at the moment are working from home. We've obviously got operational services that are attending their place of work or out and about, most notably the refuse crews. But as we move back to the winding down of a national lockdown and vaccination programme has done its job, and hopefully we're able to get back to it, there's benefits that we've all seen that we would like to try to hold on to, both in terms of reducing of carbon, efficient use of time, not lost through travelling, reduced costs of operation in terms of our buildings, etc. But weighed against that are the business requirements of getting the work done. So I think you've all acknowledged that there are pros and cons. A hybrid approach is likely. That will probably vary service to service. It is something actively being considered, and as you say, it will need to be accompanied with quite a clear plan around what it means for our buildings, what it means in terms of the culture of the organisation, and support and comms around ways of managing and working together. There's a technological solution, so it's quite a complex piece, and is something that Karen will be spearheading, but with support of some of the new recruits that she's in the process of appointing with the Employment Committee. Thank you.
You're on mute, Ashley.
Oops. Thank you for pointing that out. I've got some questions about cycling, but they probably come later on in the debate.
Okay, in that case, we'll move on to Councillor Johnson. Can we try to keep it to the cycling side of things, please?
Oh, I was just going to comment on the working from home. I think well-being has got to be a big thing when they do decide what they're doing, because it has gone on for a long time, and I think a lot of people, my son's been working from home from March, and it does affect your well-being because you're not mixing with people, and I think the hybrid approach is good. And going back to cycling, I think it's really, really good. And if people can cycle, they should be encouraged to, with something like a bike pool or something like that. But the COVID kills everything at the moment, doesn't it? You can't implement lots of things because of COVID, but it is something to bear in mind.
Okay. We'll move down to Gary Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I've said what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Wootton then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just regarding cycling, it's not going to help anybody at the moment, but there is a government initiative which is called Fix Your Bike Scheme. Sadly, we're in lockdown at the moment, so it wouldn't be operational. And all the vouchers were given out, the last vouchers were given out in November 2020. But I sincerely hope that the government come up with some more vouchers. Basically, you can claim up to, I think it's £50 to get your cycle repaired, to help people to get out their mental health, get out and exercise, etc., etc. So hopefully that'll be something to look forward to in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, as I said earlier, I'd like to actually widen this out to include the debate we had in the previous meeting and actually come up with some ideas to actually take forward that we could implement within council if appropriate. Okay, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I welcome this debate. I really do. First of all, I would recommend that we agree with the comments on page. I can't remember what page it is. Is it 76? The ones that Serena has put together. It's page 75, which are consideration of infrastructure in terms of. It's down here as showers and changing facilities. I don't know what changing facilities exist at our offices in Grantham and Bourne. Obviously, we can't have them in Stamford and Deepings because we're taking the office accommodation away. But the cycle provision, the cycle parking provision being plentiful, well maintained and accessible. I think if we had really good cycle provision where you can lock your bicycle into a hut, as happens at the Aventus, the County Council's Aventus office provision in Market Deeping, and only the cyclists are allowed the code or the lock, or individual cycle lockers such as they have at, certainly have them at Peterborough railway station, they might do at Grantham railway station, then that would be welcome. Certainly better than the very controversial cycle rack that was put in the middle of Market Deeping by the County Council. I think that whoever is managing our facilities at St Peter's Hill should have a conversation about secure cycle parking provision, and that cycle provision and maybe even the shower provision should be extended beyond people who work for the council, because there will be people who work at the cinema and people who work for the organisations that rent space within our buildings who could also make use of that provision. So it wouldn't just be for the council, it could be wider for members of the public. And if people see cycle provision being used, then they're more likely to cycle. If people see just one forlorn broken bike in a bike shed, then they'll think that doesn't look particularly secure. The second thing I was going to say, so on page 75, is it 75 still? Yeah, 75. The pool bikes, it depends what journeys are likely to be cyclable. I kind of think that the journey from the Maltings to St Peter's Hill might be a little bit short to book out a bicycle, unlock it, take it across, and then lock it up again at the other end. I don't know how often people go to the depot, but as I'm not in Grantham, I'm not the best person qualified, and maybe that's something that staff could be asked as to whether or not they would use a pool bike if it were available. I'm not sure if that was asked as part of the original question, but certainly popping out to places like Wyndham Park, that might be a kind of pool bike journey. I don't know whether cycle provision is mentioned under the Future High Streets Fund. Certainly, if we're going to be renovating the town centre in Grantham, then we should be trying to improve cycle and pedestrian connections, and that's something that we should flag to the team that are implementing the Future High Street Fund. We also said at the last meeting that we should recommend to the planners that we find a way of embedding good cycle and pedestrian provision into our planning processes. At the moment, it seems that on a particular application, somebody has to come along and flag it up, as has happened happily on a few occasions, not least in the Deepings. But I think as part of is it the design officer that we've got, or the PAD system? Perhaps we need to flag as an environment committee to the PAD team that cycling and pedestrian access is very important to us. And finally, perhaps most controversially, at the last meeting, a member of the committee, and it wasn't me, mentioned the cycle festival. And I mean, we continue to be lobbied about the cycle festival, which was very well received in Bourne and then cancelled for no apparent reason. The local community in Bourne have done a lot of work to create a business plan, and I think that should be honoured, and I think that a dialogue should continue to take place in Bourne about the Bourne Cycle Festival, and I'd certainly want to put that in as a recommendation from this committee that even if it's more modest than the last one, the comments of the Bourne Cycle Festival protagonists are taken on board. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's see. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'm just happy to second that, if that's a proposal, that we do make that recommendation about the Cycle Festival in Bourne. It was expensive, the first one, but you know, with sponsorship and with the experience of what happened in the first one, I am sure that it could be done a lot more cost effective in the if we were to hold it again. As always happens in these things, I'm sure there were lessons that were learnt, and it was fantastic, that Bourne cycle event that this council put on. And you know, we are in flat Lincolnshire. It's a great place for cycling, and to hold such an event, it was hugely popular. And given that we, you know, will still be planning the festivals in all the other towns, it seems a pity to have dropped the Bourne idea. I just want to say a couple of things. I welcome the things that Serena's put together about the supporting staff to travel by bike. We did used to have a bike shed, a brick-built bike shed at the back of the council offices in Grantham. It wasn't overly used by memory, and I think we used to charge people to use it. Please correct me if I'm wrong there, anyone. But of course, that building was pulled down when we built the cinema and the other improvements, you know, in St Peter's Hill. And I don't think there's any replacement for it, is there? You know, it does seem, you know, if we're going to be promoting cycling, that we need to make, as Serena says in here, it's a good idea to provide the cycle parking provision, which I would sort of say doesn't just need to be well maintained and securely accessed, but access is the key to it. It's got to be easily available, not half a mile from the workplace, or and it needs to be free, if I can say that. I used to commute to London from the Deepings, and I used to keep a bicycle on, I think it was platform 8, and people were encouraged to do that, and there were 200 or 300 bicycles on platform 8, and the National Rail Network provided racks, and it was fantastic. But one day they moved the bikes off platform 8. I can't remember where they put them, and it took me 10 minutes to get my bike. So I gave up. It wasn't worth it, the time, effort just wasn't worth doing it. So I ended up going on to public transport. So I'll just make the point, are there plans to bring back cycle parking provision around St Peter's Hill, at least? Thank you.
Do you want me to just clarify that, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, Peter.
No, it's all right. You're almost right. The brick building that you're referring to was actually where the chairman's car was stored. So there were no bikes in there, and that got knocked down. Of course, we don't have a chairman's car or lead or anything anymore. The cycle shelter next to it was repurposed and repositioned at one of the entrances to the revised building, so it's still there. There is still cycle storage at St Peter's Hill. That cycle shelter was moved, so there is something there. I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
We'll move on. Councillor Wooden.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. It's my understanding that the brick building, sorry to contradict you, Dr. Mosley, was actually housing the mayor's car, because I was mayor at the time, 2016. Originally, it was the chairman's car that was housed in that garage.
It was a car, Linda.
That's right. But my understanding that cycle provision was going to be moved elsewhere, and also I believe the people that kept their cycles there weren't necessarily staff. I think it was open to the public, and I understood they actually had showers there, and the thinking at the time was they were going to try and find another area to put that facility into, but I don't know any more than that. But going back to the cycle festival, it was a brilliant thing, but we must remember the taxpayer actually ended up paying, I think it was £80,000 that we were out of pocket for that event. And, I think it's a case of having to look for sponsorship if we need to put this on again. But it also belongs to the Culture Committee, I think, as well as this committee. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Next would be Councillor Crawford.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. I would just like to thank Councillor Baxter and Councillor Dilks for their comments and their proposal. What better way to encourage cycling than to have a festival? I mean, that festival event, I saw so many families cycling, and I was serving on a stall all weekend, so I saw all of that. This was the first time the cycle festival had been put on, so the expenses weren't very clear, but building on from that, you can, make adjustments and everything else. That festival not only included Bourne, but it went one of the festivals, it's the only festival that goes through villages and hamlets, and they can all participate. Again, the fens isn't quite flat, because when they went out to Beaver Way, they all realised that we had hills in the district, and people came from all over the country to that festival. And again, that's the best way to encourage cycling, is to have an event, show people what they can do and get them interested. Thank you.
Right. Okay. I've had a couple of proposals. Two lots from Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, and sorry, Chair, I pressed return too early, so the second one is the only one worth looking at, and the first one is just half the second one. So for clarity and for the benefit of the tape, I'm proposing that this committee recommends to Cabinet, or whatever the correct protocol is, number one, that we ask Cabinet to investigate the cost and benefit of improved, secure cycle storage facilities, shower facilities and pool bikes at St Peter's Hill, which I think is what Serena has put in her report. Number two, we recommend to the design team, our planning officers and to our future High Streets project that we wish to prioritise cycling and pedestrian facilities. And thirdly, that we work with residents of Bourne to run another Bourne Cycle Fest. Just to expand on that last one and to kind of add to what Councillor Crawford has said, yes, it was expensive last time, as Councillor Wotton said. It was run by Invest SK and it was an unknown quantity at the time. It was all bells and whistles, probably literally bells and whistles, but the people of Bourne, led by Brian Moran, have put together a realistic proposal for how this might be funded for a much more modest cost. And as I understand it, they have presented the business plan as requested by Councillor Trollope-Bellew, and they are waiting for a response as to how that business plan will be treated. So that's what we're asking for, really, is that the culture team work with the residents of Bourne to say, is it feasible to do a cycle fest? Because at the moment they've got a no, but they haven't really got a reason for a no. And they have put a lot of work into the business plan, so that's why I put that proposal forward, and I think Councillor Dilks has seconded it.
I believe he has, but your second option, I think that would be better if actually was actually done as a wording as of a local policy for cycling with respect to planning.
I'll be happy with that, Chair. Yes.
And then at least you're covering everything, including cycle paths being within housing estates and not just our high streets.
Yes, I'm quite happy to alter it like that. Yes.
Okay.
The pad. I'm on the pad. A council representative on the pad team, and I have to say our officers, are very good at when we look at the big plans for large housing complexes. They are very good at the connectivity with cycle and footpaths within those applications, but also connecting with the rest of the the nearby village or whatever it happens to be. So they are on it, and it is. I think it would be welcomed. Thank you.
Right. Okay. I've got a Peter, Councillor Mosley. You'd like to speak?
Yeah. It's just a thing on the item 3, and I'm sure I think Naomi's probably going to cover something in a minute. But I wouldn't want to see the scrutiny committees overlap too much. It might be better that you recommend to the other scrutiny committee that they work with residents rather than do their job for them. Yeah. I'm not quite sure whether that's in our gift. It's just one of those things about we've got scrutiny committees that do certain things. And yeah, there's a little bit of crossover, and it would be, a message of encouragement from this committee to the others to consider it would be the better way, in my view. But I mean, but it's just my, my oversight on that one that I saw a bit of an issue coming.
Okay, and Naomi, You've asked to speak with reference.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was basically, I was just going to make the same point that Councillor Dr. Mosley has just made, just that looking at the remits of the different scrutiny committees, the Culture and Visitor Economy Committee covers visitor economy and sports. So I think it might make more sense remit-wise, if you want them to look at the Bourne Cycle Festival, to perhaps refer it to them. I know that Councillor Stevens, who's the chair of that committee, is in the current meeting as well, so she may be able to provide you a bit of feedback on that.
Oh, sorry, can't stop my first time. Yeah, well, yes, I can. We have discussed it at length, actually. At the moment, we're looking at all of our festivals. We're looking at the way in which our festivals are held. We obviously have had a big hit in terms of expenditure over the last in terms of income over the last year, so that because there's been closures and none of our events have taken place, we haven't actually been generating any income with regard to the arts and culture programme. So I think there's a question mark over how we react to all with our festivals. Certainly, I mean, but this can lead to, for example, opportunities. So the Deepings Literary Festival, for example, is normally held every other year, and it was due to be held this year. So there was a big headline, which was annoying, in the Mercury recently, saying that that the Deepings Literary Festival is another casualty of COVID. Actually, far from it. The Deepings Literary Festival is embracing the fact that we're not having an actual festival this year, but a lot of our events will be virtual. And so it could well be that the Deepings Literary Festival, far from being a biannual event, will actually be much more in evidence. So the Bourne, I think we actually employed Mr. Moran, didn't we, as a director of the Bourne Cycle Festival. So I think Mr. Moran, who is obviously spearheading this, I don't know whether I don't know what his motivation is. I would say that, but he is pressing very, very heavily for us to do it again. As I say, I think it's going to have to come under the whole consideration of all our festivals going forward, and how we put those into place, bearing in mind we have had a big hit with regard to income, and we've obviously used as well the downtime that COVID has provided us with to do structural work, for example, of the roof at the Stamford Arts Centre, which would otherwise be a problem to do. So we have continued with our investment programme into that, but obviously in terms of kind of getting out there and spending a lot of money, to be perfectly frank, I don't think that's going to happen very soon. I just don't think it's possible or desirable at the moment.
Thank you, Judy. What I'll do is I'll bring it back onto topic rather than discussing what you carry out at your group, at your committee. So Alice, Councillor Baxter, you want a question? You've got your mic switched off.
Great, thanks. Thank you for that feedback. I don't know if that the comments about, I mean, obviously the comments about budget apply to everything, let alone festivals, and I don't know how it will pan out for other festivals in Bourne or elsewhere. I noticed that Councillor Trollope-Bellew is on the call, so I would kind of like to ask him what dialogue is going on with Brian Moran and the Bourne Wheelers. I know that he sent a letter asking for some.
Sorry, Councillor Baxter, can I ask you to ask that in privately between the two of them? That's
well, no, Chair, because I'd like to ask it. I'd like to ask it in public, because I don't think that Brian Moran has had a reply to his email of the 18th of January, and I think that it's courteous to supply one. So I'd like to ask if that email, without going into detail,
it's nothing to do with our committee and to do with this. It's to do with what's going on within her committee.
Well, I'd like you to give Councillor Trollope-Bellew the opportunity to reply, please.
Chairman, would you like me to reply?
If you want to.
I received an email. It is now only the 26th. We need to look into a number of requests that Mr. Moran put in his email, and we shall be corresponding with Mr. Moran and Mr. Moran only. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe there's been some amendments to what's been recommended. Is everybody happy with them? The only one I would actually, other than that, is to do with option 1, where you only talk about St Peter's Hill. I think we should be looking at all our facilities.
Yeah, you're right.
And a breakdown of costs, whether for each of the facilities rather than just an overall cost completely.
Agreed.
Right, I believe. Lost my piece.
Mr. Chairman, can you just clarify how paragraph 3 has now been amended?
To recommend that the relevant committee look again at the
Thank you.
And with other outside agencies.
Yeah.
Susan.
Apologies, I was just correcting that motion. Do you want
can you
Naomi to go through the motions for you before I take the vote?
Does everybody do them all in one go, or is they just want to vote for all 3 at one go?
All in one go.
All in one go. Okay, Susan, do you want to read them out again for me, please?
Yep. Correct me if I've got this wrong, because I was quickly typing it up as you were speaking. It is recommended to ask Cabinet to investigate the breakdown of costs and benefit for each facility for secure bike storage facilities, including shower facilities. Is that correct?
And it's down here, it says pool bikes, but I don't think we should be doing that just yet.
Yep, I'll include that. Recommend to the planning team a local policy to highlight pedestrian and cycle facilities.
I'm going to add the word creating a local planning.
Creating a local policy.
We don't have one at the moment.
Yep.
And 3
is recommend to the relevant committee to look again at the Bourne Cycle Festival and work with outside agencies.
Okay, is everybody happy with that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could just say, I appreciate what you're saying about the pool bikes. You know, it's probably a bit early to do that, but even if I just would regret losing that in that paragraph, in that recommendation, and just what we're not being. It's not tying Cabinet down to all it would be, even if they came back and said, well, we think that's too expensive, or, this is an option to look at next year or something like that. That would, just to keep it on the agenda would be helpful, in my view. But I'd take other views, obviously.
Thought I did leave it in. I did say we should take it up, but I thought.
Yeah. Do you want after shower facilities to also include pool cycle facilities?
Yeah. Apologies, sorry, I thought you took it out, Chairman. Thank you.
Can I just read that first one again to check with members? We are to recommend to Cabinet to investigate the breakdown of costs and benefit for each facility for secure bike storage, including shower facilities, and to include pool cycle facility. Is that correct?
Opportunities.
Opportunities, thank you. I've lost the word there. Thank you, Councillor. Are members happy as drafted?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Chair, do you want to vote by exception and just?
I think we'll do vote by exception if everybody's happy with that. Okay, those against? Okay, that's carried. We move on to item 10, the work programme. Okay. At the moment, the only thing in the work programme is TPO, tree replacement and hedge planting. Has anybody got anything else they want to include on the list of the items that's within our remit below? There was something that came up at council which was to do with an action item which I believe was missed due to COVID, which we actually said we would consider a policy to do with tree replacement costing for the council. I know we've seen the prices of the tree. I don't think anything else. The same tree, this item here. If anybody's got nothing else to say.
Mr. Chairman, I think Gary might have a point to make about the trees item.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Nomi. Yeah, it was just I can see on your work plan that you've got the TPO, tree replacement and hedge planting as an item. I have been in contact with the Woodland Trust. They've actually got quite a number of people currently furloughed. They've taken the decision to furlough a lot of their staff during this current national lockdown. But I have provisionally I have asked them to provisionally hold the date, a better way of saying it, of your April meeting. I just wanted to clarify what it is we specifically want the Woodland Trust to come and talk to the committee about. Happy to take this offline, Chairman, with yourself and Councillor Manterfield, but if there was any specific thoughts on the call now, I'm happy to take those. It's quite a cluster of different things that are referenced there, not all of which really would necessarily fall in the Woodland Trust's remit, but they're a bit like Sustrans will be able to come and give general views and advice and indeed suggest ideas and opportunities for joint working. Maybe that's a better focus question.
Could I come in there, Chair?
That would be good, as it was an idea came from you.
Yeah, I think that we're not asking the Woodland Trust to solve all our tree problems. That would be impertinent. But since the whole tree thing came onto the agenda and we signed the Woodland Trust local government charter for trees, we haven't actually, as a committee, we haven't actually heard from the Woodland Trust at all. I'm sure that individual members have spoken to the Woodland Trust and officers, but it's always good, in my opinion, to get experts in to share opinions. And given that they are a national charity based in Grantham, and even though it would be online now anyway, I think it would certainly, I would appreciate an opportunity to hear what the Woodland Trust have got to say about the Charter's progress nationally and also the Charter's progress locally. We are committed, we've signed the Charter, but for obvious reasons of COVID and budget and everything else, the progress with trees to date has been limited. And so, yeah, I would quite appreciate a dialogue offline outside this meeting about what we might aspire to as a council in terms of trees. The other parts of it, I don't think we're particularly asking Woodland Trust for advice on how we manage our tree officer or our TPOs, or whether we have a policy to replace one with one or one with six. But currently we don't have a policy to replace trees that have been felled, and there's quite a bit that we could do in terms of promoting tree cover across the district that we haven't done. I just think that listening to the Woodland Trust's opinion would be helpful in terms of our thought processes. Does that make sense?
Councillor Cottier, with your permission to respond to that. Yeah, very much so. I understand what you've just described there. If other members are supportive of that or don't have any other comments, that's helpful. I'm understanding it around the the Woodland will change how it's described on the forward plan, but invite the Woodland Trust to come along to talk to us and to give us a general update, to talk about opportunities for the future, progress in general around the tree charter, including nationally, and promoting any opportunities around tree cover. So basically, it's that broader scope. It's not about specifics around TPOs and all that. That was where I just wanted to clarify. I assumed that was the case. So thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Stilts.
Yeah, you're very kind. Thank you. I just wanted to come back on that. You know, I want to hear from the Woodland Trust, but not just because we like trees, but because planting trees is going to have a big part in the climate change challenge, if I can put it that way, in terms of carbon capture or storage. You know, so it's I'd like them to talk, you know, around that as well, if that's possible, Gary. You know, what can we do? What is, you know, a little bit sort of more about the role of trees in the climate change challenge. Does that make sense? Sorry.
It does, with your permission, Councillor Cottier. Yeah, yes, that does make sense. So I'll add in that dimension as well. I mean, we'll be able to explore this in the April committee, but of course, one of the issues that we have is the limitations on the ability that the council has versus the wider area. Councillor Baxter, in a sense, touched on some of that in what he was describing, and the ability of access to land, suitable land for planting of trees, is one of the challenges. But you're right, there's definitely a climate change dimension, certainly over the longer term. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else they want to include in the work programme?
I'd just like to say, Chairman, that I would agree with inviting the Woodland Trust to come along and give us a presentation of what they actually do. They do a lot of work in the area that I represent in Grantham, and they're always pleased to speak to us. So I think that's a jolly good idea. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll move on. Item 11. Any other business? I've had nothing sent through to me saying really urgent. Any items really urgent? Nope. Okay. In that case, I'll call the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Speak to Peter, please. It's Breeder.
Peter, can you stay online if any chance?
I'm afraid Councillor Dr. Mosley has already left the meeting. You might need to contact him outside of the meeting, I'm afraid, Councillor Griffin.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Trying to do two birds with one stone.
Naomi?
Yes.
On the pages to do with the work programme, it might be an idea to include, it says committee member request, might be an idea to actually include who actually requested it.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
It's very useful to me to be able to go back to the person and say, what do you actually want?
Yes, yeah, that's noted for future reference. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just add that that's a new item that's been added, so going forward, that's the intention.
Great, thank you.
But thank you for that. It endorses what we were doing.